Hour number two of our program today is going to be devoted to discussions about firearms, as it often is on Fridays between 9 and 10 o'clock. Actually, quite a bit of the program in the first hour today may also touch on that very same subject because we're getting a lot of gnashing of teeth from the American left the last couple of days after one of their own shot down, of course, the third highest ranking member of the House Republican caucus during a baseball practice a couple of days ago. Lefty now says, well, this wouldn't happen if we take away our guns. I cited this yesterday, just briefly. I happened to be watching some of the coverage after the shooting on Wednesday, and I was up late and I watched The Five on the Fox News channel. And Juan Williams was saying, after somebody said, well, good guys with guns, stop this shooter before the carnage could be worse. And Juan Williams said, well, that's because they're trained. Well, let's take a moment and think about this. Most of the people that I know who own firearms, and these are people who are not necessarily law enforcers or in the military, they're also trained. Just about all of them have some sort of training, and some of them have years of training and no safety, and they grew up in an environment. So when I hear that out of someone like Juan Williams, what he's referring to are those inner city gangs in places like, well, Washington and Baltimore and Chicago and Los Angeles, Seattle, and a lot of the larger cities in this country. Some of that is now permeating our small towns too, as well. These are the guys who drive down the street with a hopped up vehicle, the lights on the bottom, the chrome wheels. And as they're driving down the street, they're shooting and they've got their hands sideways. And then they end up shooting bullets through the wall of a house and killing some 3-year-old sleeping in a bassinet. Now, if we actually went out and took everyone's guns away and said that's the new law, would those gangbangers still have firearms? Now, they're not getting training, and they're often obtaining firearms illegally. So I guess this comes right back. It's full circle. It comes back to Lefty is just completely out of his league when he tries to talk about this. Because I'm sure that Juan Williams, who likely lives in a manicured neighborhood in a trendy part of Washington or in one of the trendy suburbs, doesn't know anybody in flyover country who can handle a squirrel gun. 8 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you. This morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. I happened to see this last night on Facebook, just before I nodded off to bed. I stayed up. Can I point out, too? I stayed up and I watched the congressional baseball game last night. It's the first time I've actually ever done that. It's funny how I hadn't ever given the game a whole heck of a lot of thought. But a few weeks ago, I was watching the Congressman Kevin Brady from Texas. And he happened to be on TV, and I remarked to some friends how much he looks like the unemployed football coach Rex Ryan. I mean, they're dead ringers. And so I was talking to some folks in Raul Labrador's office a few days later about that. And an hour later, I received in my email a photograph of Kevin Brady playing in the congressional baseball game and hitting a home run a couple of years ago. He's still on the team. He's apparently a very good ball player. So I wanted to see a little bit of his action out there too as well. And so I tuned in and I watched the game. I should note there were more pass balls than Congress passes bills, but it was still fun to watch. And what I did, it was not easy to find. I don't get C-SPAN. I cut the cord on my TV a while ago, so I don't get C-SPAN, which is for cable users. And I needed to find the game somewhere, so I have this Alexa thing on my TV, and I said YouTube, and all of a sudden it goes, and YouTube pops up on the TV screen, on the big screen. And then I typed in congressional baseball game, and there were numerous places carrying it, including the Fox television affiliate out of Phoenix. So I was able to watch the game on YouTube live from Nationals Park in Washington via a feed out of Phoenix, Arizona. And they're covering it in Phoenix because Jeff Flake, senator from Arizona, is one of the big stars on the GOP team. Now, the Republicans took a beating. I believe the final score was 11-2. And in the history of the series now, that gives the Democrats 40 wins to the Republicans 39. And I think the reason that this is taking place is I looked over the lineups on the two teams last night, and most of the Democrats who are playing are young. Rand Paul, for instance, plays for the Republicans. While he looks youthful, I think he's the second youngest guy on the team. I think he's 53. So they have and one of the players for the Republicans is a retired 3-star Marine general. and he looks like he's 70. And get this, Tom Osborne also plays for the Republicans. Now, Tom Osborne retired from coaching football at Nebraska. What? I mean, eons ago. He's still out there playing baseball. So the fact that these guys, I mean, this geriatric set got at least 2 runs out of a much younger squad, I guess is a bit of a moral victory for the Republicans. So I was getting ready to go to bed after watching the game last night when I saw this link on Facebook. And it comes from, there's a fellow that used to be involved as a lobbyist here in Idaho, and he helped get the permitless carry, the constitutional carry passed in this state. And he is now doing this same work in Wisconsin and in Michigan and some other states. He's been testifying and working the halls of the state legislatures there in the Midwest. And he posted something from the Wisconsin Second Amendment Alliance. Someone within that organization happened to be watching MSDNC after the shooting Wednesday. And this is a screen capture of some actual audio from a woman who claimed to be an analyst. She says she knows what she's talking about when it comes to firearms. Listen to what she says, and nobody disputes it either.
There is a point when we were listening to some of the interviews with the representatives. One of them said that there was a pause, a moment, and he was able to leave where he was exposed and run away. So that might have been a reload. So the difference is a pistol can fire 1 round at a time. Pop, 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 which is what the Capitol Police were carrying. This individual had a rifle. Semi-automatic means that you can switch it to a point where it fires pop, 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 multiple rounds.
Some of the lawmakers thought they had heard 50 to 60 shots. Yes. Who knows? You're a witness, you're hearing, who knows, but that's what it sounded like.
Yes, and it's very likely that that's the type of weapon that he's using. That is the type of weapon that we see in these mass shooting attacks. And I have to say, it's pretty remarkable that the police were able to stop them with from what we're hearing, their pistols.
Well, they stopped him because he was a terrible shot, and they're not. Number 2, he tried to practice behind his house in Illinois, and the deputies came by and said, whoa, there's too many houses nearby, and they told him to stop, and he did. So he likely hasn't had any range practice since March. But according to her, she says there's apparently, did you know this? There's a little switch on your rifle, and all you have to do is, and all of a sudden, you turn it from single shot into semi-automatic, and then all of a sudden it turns into a machine gun. I had no idea. I've never seen these before. This must be a brand new invention. Either that, or you just wish it. You stand there with your rifle and you close your eyes and you say, I wish this was a machine gun. I wish this was a Tommy gun. I wish this was a Tommy gun. And lo and behold, all of a sudden it turns into one in your hands. 8:14. These are the people who are cautioning us or telling us that we need to have greater controls on firearms, and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. It's 62. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I was looking at some bolt action last night online, thinking about purchasing something like that. And again, if you're proficient at this, and you have what is called muscle memory, you can probably get off a lot of shots anyway. But, if you have a magazine too, you might be able to get off a number of shots, and then you just switch out and pop a new magazine in. And apparently that eludes the folks over at MSDNC. And even then, while you're doing that, you leave yourself exposed. And that may be when he actually got gunned down by the officers from the Capitol Police. And by that time, there were numerous other officers arriving from the Alexandria City PD. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 61. Oh, quick note, too. I just saw a headline. The president's approval rating is up to 50%. It's been a long time since it has been there. Meanwhile, Lefty is screaming and yelling about the fact that, they're now investigating Donald Trump for obstruction of justice, and they're looking into all of his campaign staff. And they're looking at the finances of his family and campaign staff, as if this somehow means that everyone who's being investigated is guilty. Well, this is normally how any investigation progresses. They look into all of these types of things. And yet there's this breathless media coverage. They must be guilty. It'll only be a matter of time before Bob Mueller gets the rope out and starts hanging these people right down on the National Mall publicly in front of all of our cameras, and we'll really enjoy that because, All along now, we've only been able to watch the president fictionally killed in that Shakespeare play, but this will be the real thing. Oh, oh, oh. They are just so breathlessly hoping that he'll go away and that this will be the reason he goes away. Look, I was the subject of an investigation, not because I wanted to be, but in 2010. It might have even been as long ago as 2009. I was involved with an organization that we'll call Proto Tea Party. And it was a group of people. Some of them listened to my radio program. They invited me to a meeting at a local Legion Hall, and I went there. And they were forming a group to essentially act as a political lobbying organization. And they were right of center. And I went and I got involved, and I got some of the people on the air on the program. And then a friend of mine that I had worked with, her name was Maria Evans. Maria's father-in-law had been at one time the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and he had served 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, and so she was well connected politically. I got a telephone call from her one day on the telephone, and she said, I'm just going to tell you right now, I've got some information here from friends in government. She said, the State Office of Homeland Security is investigating that organization and you. And they're doing this at the orders of the Republican governor of the state, or Democrat, rather, governor of the state. There was a Democrat serving at the time. And then we were later told that while we were at one of these meetings at the Legion Hall, that people came in and literally wrote down the numbers on license plates so they could run checks on them to see who was there. And for a time, we even had a state trooper coming to our meetings when we all knew that he was working undercover to see what everyone was. And after a while, it just became, hey, yeah, come on in. And it wasn't long before he was actually coming to some of our meetings on his own when they discovered none of us were dangerous. And but the fact that we were being investigated didn't mean we were guilty. It only meant that somebody in government was nervous that somebody was opposing them and decided to bring in all of the investigators to look into the backgrounds of everyone involved. And then they discovered that I think I had 2 overtime tickets for overtime parking in my lifetime, and those are the only tickets I've ever received. And then it went away, as simple as that. So this notion that just because an investigation is going to consider whether Donald Trump tried to obstruct justice, well, we've been hearing this for weeks anyway. And, they'll make a conclusion at the end of it. And even if the prosecutor's office comes back and says, well, we think there's enough evidence, it doesn't mean anyone's going to be convicted of anything. I throw that out there, and it's good because it's a very subjective thing. Right now, you've got people who say that he was asking the former FBI director to go easy on Mike Flynn when all he said was, I hope that this can go away. So it shows you just how everyone in Washington and the mainstream media right now has already convicted this guy because they simply don't like him. And they will not acknowledge that perhaps their own tone, they're telling everybody else, oh, our rhetoric has been so harsh. Well, not ours, but yours. That's why this shooting happened, because it makes guns angry, and then guns do bad things. So because of your harsh rhetoric, we have to take your guns away. Our rhetoric is fine, though. We haven't done anything to gin any of this up. No, we here at the New York Times, we know it's all Sarah Palin's fault. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 64. Beautiful weekend coming along. Quick note, tomorrow morning from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Benito Baeza and I are going to be at the Reformed Church on Pole Line Road as part of the Drive Means Drive event that's going on there. Hope to see you all there as well. A little pleasant music there. It brings back some memories from childhood. 21 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. As it turns out, if you catalog most of the political violence in this country, very little of it, at least in the last 20 years, has come from right of center. And, you could argue, well, Tim McVeigh was right of center, and that was a horrible, horrible act of violence. But I don't know that you can actually call his politics right or left. He was just plain an anarchist. And you got plenty of those on the right and left. I'm going to share with you, if we get a chance this morning, a couple of lists on this, especially what's gone on in just the last year and a half in this country and who's responsible for it. Let me just put it this way. They are not registered Republicans. 22 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Temperatures by the middle of next week will be back into the 90s. A beautiful stretch of days are ahead of us. If you'd like to enjoy those days in the comfort of an air-conditioned home, but you're having difficulty keeping that house cool, call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right, and they'll get it done right the first time. They'll get down to business. Is probably the way I'm putting that. Problem-free, cozy summers are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number is 678-0459. That's Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. I believe we have a caller looking to join us this morning. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. The old slogan, only outlaws will have guns in and out. When guns are outlawed, I'll get it right here. When guns are outlawed, only outlaws in and out of government will have guns. This is the hallmark of dictatorship. Just ask all enslaved. Most of the people in the world live under a dictatorship, and ask how many of them own guns. None, because the government has them all. And this is the last bastion of freedom in this country, is to keep our personal firearms and keep the powder dry. But right off the bat, here's the New York, the Washington Post or Gabby Gifford in the paper today. We got to have more gun laws. And yet they totally ignore this guy was totally radicalized. And how many more out there that have been listening to all this garbage? And now that they take a fake news deal on Trump and, of course, make it into obstruction of justice. I mean, they won't quit. And it's just that they have to get rid of Trump because he's not an insider and he's interfering with their plans for the New World Order.
And I'll add, their efforts from a religious standpoint look almost satanic. The devil is relentless.
Well, absolutely. These people are satanic. They're evil. They're just flat evil. And New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN and so forth, I mean, they're not going to give up. I talked to friends, and they said, well, we hope that this will unite the country and the Democrats and the media will back off. And I said, are you kidding? They've have an agenda, had it for decades, and they're not going to change their drive to destroy this country, make us a third world country one way or another, make us into a dictatorship so that we can comfortably merge into this new, glamorous, glorious new world under United Nations control, which, of course, has always been under control of communists and socialists. And that's what our future is. We need to get out of the UN, pass H.R. 193, H.R. 193. Get hold of your congressmen, senators, and get that bill passed and implode the United Nations building into the East River. That'd be a great deal.
Thank you much for the call. A wonderful idea. You can't sell it for scrap because it's pretty well rusted and falling apart. Although they've come to one member and said, can you pay for all the repairs and replacing it? And then we're going to badmouth you some more after you do it. 825. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. I want to thank the caller for chiming in. We're at 63, and it's good to have you here on News Radio 1310 KLIX. NewsRadio1310.com. So I saw an editorial this morning at the New York Times. The New York Times is complaining about President Trump in Afghanistan. For 8 years, apparently, the Afghan war just simply went away because it was, George Bush's war, one of his wars. And then it went away for 8 years. And now that there's a Republican in office again, and the editorial says, Afghanistan is your war now, Mr. Trump. Well, whose war was it from January 20th, 2009 until January 20th, 20... Oh, there was no war. Nope. No, it was all over with. It just resumed after Trump became president because apparently not only do liberals and media hate Mr. Trump, but so do the Taliban. If the Taliban hates you, I think you're doing well. Meanwhile, after the Times sort of apologized because it had an editorial yesterday blaming Sarah Palin for the shooting of Gabby Gifford 6 years ago in Arizona. There was never a link there. Media tried to plant that seed for a couple of days, and a lot of liberals still repeat it because, in their devious little minds, they just want you to believe that, and so they'll ignore all the facts. But even some people on the left were calling out the Times yesterday. Jake Tapper at CNN, the Clinton News Network, and some of the, I think it was this guy Chris Hayes at MSDNC saying, yeah, this might be a little too far. So the Times, well, it didn't get corrected, obviously, in the print edition, but the Times somewhat backed away from it online. So I saw this editorial about Afghanistan, and I chimed in the comments section. This was an hour ago. I chimed in the comments section. I said, I think I know what's going on in Afghanistan. A newspaper told me that Sarah Palin is leading a band of Taliban fighters outside of Kabul. And I got a little note that said, when your comment is approved, we will notify you by email. Well, nothing's come through yet. So, in other words, don't mock us for our lies. We're not going to allow you to do that. But we are a free and open platform here at the New York Times for all ideas, as long as they're ours. 827, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I do want to mention, coming up on our program next Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, we're going to be talking medical issues as we do every week with the folks from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. The office is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. And I remind you again that Dr. Tripp and his staff are still looking for new patients. As a patient of Dr. Tripp's office, if you call in the morning with a medical ailment, they can often see you on the very same day. There's no waiting in line for 3 weeks, as you'd have to do with one of these assembly line medical outfits. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. We also will be talking firearms in hour number 2 of the program today. I've got a lot of material to cover on that, and some of it has to deal with some of our neighboring states very close to us. Did you know, and I brought this up earlier, that 19 states have, did I bring it up on air? It may have been in my pregame warm-up on Facebook. 19 states allow state legislators to some degree to conceal carry when they're on the job, because this does not happen in Washington because of the draconian gun laws. The Supreme Court will slap down Washington, city government, and then they come back and say, well, okay, we're going to rewrite the law and try it again. Then the court slaps them down again, and then relentless as Satan is, they come back and they do it all over again. So you've got a guy by the name of Loudermilk. He's a member of the House of Representatives from Georgia, played in the ball game last night. He's saying that they should be allowed to carry when they're at work at the Capitol building. Capitol building is multiple buildings, really, if you think about the Cannon office building and the like across the street. I've been in some of those and visited. There's 20,000 people in and out of that Capitol complex every day. Somewhere, somehow, some bad guy could slip through. We've had shootings there, too, as recently as 20 years ago, in the last 20 years, 1998, I believe it was, that took place where you had one of the officers who was shot while he was outside. But 19 states already allow this, including places such as Idaho. The only thing that shocked me was Idaho and Wyoming allow it. They allow anybody to come in and out of the Capitol building who's got concealed carry. And there's no metal detector. Now, I know some people out there would think that that's an intrusion, but I don't know. If I was serving in the legislature, I wouldn't find a metal detector to be intrusive at all. I'm just saying, we're in a period of time right now where you don't know what the loony left will do. You should take every precaution. It's 8:30. We're at 64. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. If you ever wonder why Lefty is up to all of these things and what Lefty's really trying to do and the messages Lefty's trying to sell in media, you even hear it in sports media now. Sports media, got to take a quick look at the TV. One of my favorite members of the House of Representatives is on the screen right now. She's from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn. Proof positive that you can also be good-looking and intelligent. I wanted to point out that you've got people even in the sports world now. You've got these sports broadcasters, and it happens in sports writing too. Mike Lupica, who's one of the better-known sports columnists in the country for years, has been peddling a liberal agenda as if, well, we're right and you're wrong, and there's no debating or arguing this. But they're especially doing it with impressionable young men who watch ESPN. Most sports fans, when I was growing up, would have been fairly conservative people. You know, the liberals were all down at the library reading poetry, I guess. 8:34, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I want to just mention quickly, too, we were just talking about hearing health a couple of minutes ago, but I'd like to remind people, if you're struggling with your hearing, I have a friend who can take a look at your ears and actually come up with some solutions. That's Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology. Why would you choose Dr. Pickup and Mount Harrison Audiology? Because of trust. As a certified audiologist and independent business owner, Dr. Pickup will never use deceptive advertising to sell a hearing aid. There's no bait and switch, no seeking participants to try a type of aid. At Mount Harrison Audiology, you'll be offered your choice of brands with recommendations based on your hearing and your goals. Local and independent. You can trust Dr. Pickup with your hearing and your budget. Call to schedule your appointment today, 208-312-0957. Over at ESPN, there's a fellow by the name of Max Kellerman. And he was talking with Stephen A. Smith during a discussion last night about ne'er-do-well Colin Kaepernick not having a job. I know, it just breaks your heart. Well, he can run with the ball, he just can't throw it, and the job requirement is sometimes you have to throw it. But this guy, Kellerman, is trying to compare what is happening right now with Colin Kaepernick to what happened to Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali refused induction into the Army. Remember when Ali did that, there was liberals said, well, we don't like the war either, so therefore Muhammad Ali is great. Despite the fact if he'd gone in the Army, they would have just had him do what Joe Louis did, and that was in World War II. He boxed exhibitions. And he would have been out in a couple of years and back home, and no harm, no foul. This is Max Kellerman, though, trying to make this comparison. And then listen to what he says about one of our most hallowed institutions.
In Muhammad Ali's case, he was asked to take a step forward and become a part of the Vietnam War. And he was against it on religious and moral and ethical principles. And he refused to take the step. And he faced 5 years jail time, ultimately, but was vindicated in a Supreme Court case. Okay, but he did have his prime stripped, his license revoked. He couldn't earn a living for 4 years, all that. Colin Kaepernick also did not go looking for a protest. It came to him. He was asked to stand for the national anthem. You do not have to stand for the national anthem, and even if it was a rule that you did, is that Colin Kaepernick injecting politics into the NFL? No. That's the NFL injecting politics by playing the national anthem and putting pressure on you to stand for it in the first place.
Injecting politics into the game by playing the national anthem in the National Football League. The National Football League. Okay. Which plays its games generally in the United States of America. Generally with ball players born and raised in the United States of America. This is political to play the national anthem? Not well, like they tell us in schools now, it's political to fly the American flag, don't they? It's okay if you fly the Mexican flag because, we need to celebrate our heritage and participate in the Reconquista. But you can't fly the Stars and Stripes because somebody somewhere may be offended. And if it hurts their feelings, well, then we know it to be wrong. 8:38, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Some stories going around that Kaepernick could be signed by the Seahawks. When he says Kaepernick, just fell into this by accident. No, he didn't. He made a conscious choice that he was going to be showy on the sidelines and not do it. Because his Marxist girlfriend at the time convinced him. He's not even political. This dolt is so incredibly stupid. He just, I sure like the way you look. Whatever you say. And so then he decided he was going to kneel during the national anthem. And to sit here and say it wasn't his choice. What? He made a very conscious choice at the time to do that. Now, it's also well within the bounds of anybody in the National Football League, an employer, to say, I'm sorry, but we don't want you because of the baggage you carry, which is why Michael Vick for a long time had a tough time finding work again after he literally paid his debt to society, serving a couple of years in prison for torturing dogs, paid his debt to society. But even then, a lot of teams wouldn't take a flyer on him because, well, hey, he was considered to be damaged goods. There's public relations involved in all of this as well. You got to keep people in the stands and sell tickets, and if they don't show up, well, then you're a detriment to the game. 8:40, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Maybe he's just bad. Maybe people aren't hiring him because he's not very good. The media they beat the drum for Michael Sam a few years ago. Oh, gay linebacker. Yes, we need more gay players in the NFL. Yeah, but he was awful. Short break. We've got more coming up on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. I have an email from a member of the audience out in Minidoka County asking about Russ Fulcher and his decision to drop out of the race for governor and instead run for the open seat in the 1st Congressional District, which is the northern seat. It's not Mike Simpson's seat. I know that there are members of this audience who'd certainly like to see someone of Fulcher's character and status challenge Mike Simpson, although we don't know that Simpson's even going to run for re-election. I assume he will. It's 8:44. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com at 67. I have wondered for a long time if Fulcher worked this out with Labrador while Labrador was getting his ducks in order. Fulcher sort of held that ground among the constitutionalists till Labrador was ready, and then Raoul jumps into the governor's race, and then Fulcher says, I'm running for Raoul's seat, which I think he'll have a very good chance of winning, maybe even a better chance of winning than Labrador will have as winning the primary for governor. 8:44, as I mentioned, on KLIX. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. We're at 63. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You know, your last segment is kind of disturbing when you think that people say that the Star Spangled Banner or standing for the national anthem is political. It's not political. It's pride for your country. The problem is the left has made pride for your country political. And that's so it's confusing to me, and it's baffling how we can confuse one for another.
We're dealing with people out there who are trying to sow this confusion. They're trying to sow the anti-Americanism. They have so convinced themselves that everything about our culture is bad and wrong, and that every other culture is great and good. And unfortunately, they have control of all of these major media institutions and parts of government, huge swaths of it, and the academic world as well. And they're working, obviously, to turn young minds in that direction.
And they're succeeding.
Sure.
This is the big problem. I mean, we need to open our eyes and ask ourselves a couple of questions. One, is anyone holding these people here in this country if they hate the country? No. They can board any plane, anytime, anywhere, and go anywhere they want. Two, if this country is so god-awful, how come people by the droves try to come here illegally?
And as refugees, and I thank you for the call, in huge numbers. I have a friend whose parents are mom is from Turkey, his dad from Pakistan. They're not very religious people. His dad's a scientist, and his mother is, I think, also in a similar type of job. But when they came here, they eventually ended up moving to Canada. Just work took them there, but they settled in the United States for many, many years. And he said his dad used to tell him, there's no other country in the world where you will find the opportunity that you find the opportunity here. And he still believes that. He carries that with him today. It's 8:46. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 65. I was just reading a couple of stories this morning. One was at Crisis, which is a conservative Catholic publication, and I believe the other was at The Resurgent, which is, more of a Reformed, a Protestant approach, about how we have Christians who are just being backed into a corner in this country. Because whether or not, you can make the argument, pro and con, that the United States is a Christian nation, even though the founders used the word creator and they didn't reference Jesus. You can also read their writings, the writings of people like Madison and Adams, and they talk a lot about Christianity and how important it is to help build the moral foundation of the country. Well, you remember a couple of weeks ago, Bernie Sanders was haranguing a Christian who was looking for a job, essentially to work as a finance director in government. Because as a Christian, he actually takes to heart what the Bible says. It just, and again, it's true. Muslims don't believe in the divinity of Jesus, so therefore they're not worshiping the same God. It's as simple as that. But Sanders just raked this guy over, and the notion is if you're in politics, then you shouldn't have any religion. Apparently, well, he doesn't, so he assumes everyone else doesn't. The leader of one of the more liberal parties in England, not the actual Liberal Party, it's one of the smaller parties, just resigned this week because he said he could no longer, as a Christian, follow the party's platform, which is for same-sex marriage and group sex and sex with, I guess, farm animals. And he said he could no longer do that, so he resigned his position. The party members, by the way, said, well, good riddance, go ahead. We don't want anyone like you here. I was thinking about this the other day because I'm wearing one of my Washington Nationals ball caps today. And the Nationals a few days ago had a what they call a Pride Night. All the Major League Baseball teams do this, where they have a night where they fly the rainbow flag and they put the rainbow emblem on their hats. And why do they do it? Not necessarily because you could say they're promoting that lifestyle. They're not doing it, though, because of any altruism or any belief one way or the other. They're doing it because it makes money. When you're paying a pitcher like Max Scherzer $217 million over the course of 8 or 9 years, you have to find ways to pay him. And you have to then expand your base, your ticket buying base, if you will. So, you'll have left-handed night at the ballpark. You'll have Pride Night at the ballpark. You'll have, troglodyte night at the ballpark. Whatever you can do to bring people out so you can sell tickets and popcorn and then raise the money to pay these high salaries that these ball players get. But a friend of mine called me and he said, because he knows I have about 30 Nationals hats, different colors, different styles. He says, hey, I got you one of those rainbow hats. He says, although I know you won't wear it. I don't know about that. If it's a pretty hat, I might wear it. I don't feel I'm endorsing anything one way or another. But here's the thing. We keep hearing people of Christian faith especially. It's funny the liberals don't call out the Muslims who believe the same things because they're afraid of them. And they know that the Christians aren't going to come and, take a knife and then... Remember what happened to that Dutch filmmaker where they posted their grievances in his chest using a knife? They know Christians don't generally do that sort of thing. But they tell us that we believe in a bunch of hokum. They'll tell us, they'll call it myth. Now, myth basically just means a foundational story. It doesn't mean it's wrong. So then they'll say, well, it's fiction. And you have no evidence. Well, that's why they call it faith. You have the faith. But here's the thing. When it comes to the same-sex lifestyle, think about this. They decoded the human genome about 15 years ago. They found no evidence of a gay gene, as they kept calling it. So then I was watching a story on 60 Minutes, and Leslie Stahl was interviewing a woman who said, well, maybe then if it's not a gene, maybe it's a chemical reaction in the womb. Except they found no evidence of any chemicals in the womb So for all of these people who say they're born that way, that may not be true. And so they have no more... I believe that my Lord and Savior, that he rose on the third day, that he commanded the rock to move from the entrance to his burial cave, his chamber, and that he left. I believe that. Now, they will tell me that I have certainly no evidence to back that up, but they've got no evidence to back up their argument. They're telling us we have to accept what they believe without any, and I should point out, without any settled science. On climate change, they tell us it is settled. But they're telling us that we have to accept basically on faith what they believe and abandon what faith we already have. Don't they see some sort of contradiction? 8:51, we're at 63. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And a caller joins us. You're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Well, I'll tell you, thanks for taking my call. What you just said prompted me to call. You're exactly right. I'm Catholic. I go to St. Jerome's. My wife and I, Saturday night at 5:30, we'll be going to Mass, and we'll be sitting on the southwest corner like we always have, and we'll decide. And I'm going to drag anybody off the street and make them sit with us, force them to come to church with us, and go to communion and what have you. It ain't happening. And where that Bernie Sanders and people like him think they have the right to even suggest, let alone try to make you change your ways, that's the of our country. Thank God we have the Second Amendment. Thank God we have the First Amendment. And if it wasn't for the Republicans, we wouldn't have the 13th. Well, we probably would now, but back then we wouldn't even have that.
Right.
It was the Republicans that did that. It was conservatives that did that. And so these people come along saying, well, we got to change everything because it makes it fair. This gay rights stuff. Okay, fine. I ain't going to wear no multicolored flag. I don't go along with it. But have you heard me on your show say they shouldn't do it? I don't agree with it. I do not agree with liberals. I can't stand abortion. But I've never went out to hurt somebody because of my feelings to make them feel the way I do. That would not be fair on my part. Now, to sit down and have a debate, to sit down and discuss, maybe do it over an adult beverage, that's fine. But where the hell these people come along saying, well, we're just going to make everybody think our way, and if they don't, we're going to embarrass them. You just said a second ago they're going to back Christians against the wall.
Yeah.
I ain't going against no wall. I ain't going against no wall. And any chump that wants to come up and try to slap me or talk to me about that, come on. You might whip my butt, but I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to think God himself did it, was standing there, because I ain't going to put up with it. I don't have to. I'm not going to. Now, am I going to go out and hurt somebody like a bunch of liberals do? No. Am I going to go out and embarrass somebody and throw paint on them and break their windows and to burn their cars? No. I'm going to sit here, the voice, and debate. That's how we do things. For conservatives are good people. We don't like her.
I'm losing your call, but I thank you for chiming in this morning. I by the way, he mentioned he's got a very distinct voice. He mentioned a couple of weeks ago he was in a diner and somebody picked up his voice by the sound of his voice, and I think I actually was a couple of Sundays ago. I think I was in Costco and actually heard his voice while I was doing some shopping. So one of these days I'll get to meet some of you. 8:55. We've got a short break in just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to be talking about firearms in hour number 2 of the program. A Daily Caller today. If you've never looked at this publication, you should. I won't read this out loud, but it says the list of attacks against conservatives is mind-blowing. And they start from July 2016 and go month by month. It's 3 pages long, friends. 3 pages long. Can you imagine that? We have another caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Quickly, Bill, I worked hard yesterday. It was hot where I was at. Came home. Wanted to sit down and relax. Sometimes I'll check Eternal Classic Movies, whatever the hell it's called, because they have old traditional movies that have morals, and it was kind of weird because they had a movie called All That Heaven Allows with Rock Hudson and somebody else that used to be married to Ronald Reagan. I can't think of her name.
Jane Wyman.
Yes, and it was a good show. Well, it was weird because they had 2 hosts in there, and when I got to look at 2 men, well, the reason they were doing it was because they were going to have gay night at Turner Classic Movies. And I thought, oh, my God. You hear All That Heaven Allows was the movie, and it was very moral and wholesome, and Rock Hudson was he was squared away in his life on the movie, but no, he was really gay, and he had multiple lovers, and then the next show was A Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and I can just watch that just to look at Elizabeth
a guy
Taylor.
from Rock Hudson, at least the people from his generation, he didn't go around broadcasting it, screaming, look at me, look at what I am.
Exactly. He kept it under wraps, and but I didn't know about it till late in his life. But Tennessee Williams, I guess his name was really Tom, but he was gay, and then these gay men were introducing it. And so my whole attitude was, I come home to watch a movie, and I go to Turner Classic Movies here and there just to try to get some wholesome movies. And then here we have gay night with 2 gay men, trying to legitimize their gay lifestyle. I'll hang up. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for the call. Yeah, and remember, children, if you'd like to join in, here's how you can go about doing it. And we'll recruit you, and then we'll have more people to argue, and then eventually we'll force everybody. Which is, I fear, the direction we're going. 8:57. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and News Radio. You can't have an opinion that doesn't back up theirs. And as I said earlier, it's not even settled science, which is the usual argument you hear out of Lefty. We'll talk firearms in the next hour of the program on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com, just after the news at 9 o'clock from Fox.